Hello, my name is Morgan Maze, a national safe advocate from Indonesia. I am 22 years young. I work as a class assistant on weekly online class for a big group of young adults with Down syndrome. Welcome to the 10th World Down Syndrome Day conference at the United Nations in New York. It is being held to celebrate World Down Syndrome Day. This year, it has to be virtual event because of COVID-19. The event provides a platform for people with Down syndrome, supporters and advocates, government and UN officials and NGO representatives to work together. The theme this year connects for World Down Syndrome Day. The focus will be ensuring all persons with Down syndrome can connect and participate on an equal basis with others. This is the official opening and launch of the conference. It is the first of 3 sessions for the event. Each session is being held as a webinar this year. A few things about the webinar for those of you joining us on GoToWebinar. Today, you can make comments or ask questions in the chat box. If we don't get back to you during the webinar, we will get back to you as soon as possible afterwards. There is a program and information for this event in the handout section. We would also like to ask you to complete a very short survey when you exit the webinar. We value your feedback. First, I would like to ask Vladimir dos Santos from South Africa, the president of DSi, to say a few words.
Good morning. On behalf of the Board of Down Syndrome International, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 10th World Down Syndrome Conference at the United Nations, New York. The 21st of March 2021 marks the 16th anniversary of World Down Syndrome Day. Annually, events are celebrated all around the world, and this year's theme is Connect for World Down Syndrome Day. All people with Down syndrome must have opportunities to connect and participate on a full and equal basis with others in all aspects of their lives. Connecting is essential for their personal well-being, and when given the opportunity, brings so much to the community wherever they live around the world. But many face barriers to connecting, which have been worsened since the event of COVID-19. So we are calling upon every person with Down syndrome and those who advocate with them to tell the world that this needs to change. This campaign draws from the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD, in a wide sense, capturing the essence of the general principles of Article 3, full and effective participation and inclusion in society and equality of opportunity. It also draws on Article 9, requiring that state parties shall take appropriate measures to ensure persons with disabilities have access on an equal basis with others to information, including communications, technologies and systems. Connecting is crucially important to the realization of all rights, particularly in relation to education and employment. The campaign also draws from the 2030 Agenda Sustainable Development Goal 16 to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Connecting is also vital to achieve their other goals. Our aim of this conference is to reflect on the need to ensure that people with Down syndrome are not being left behind through lack of opportunities to connect and participate in key areas of life. Exploring the work being done to improve connections now and into the future, and to empower persons with Down syndrome and their families to advocate to ensure equal right in this context, and to reach out to key stakeholders and to bring about positive change. This conference provides a platform for people with Down syndrome, their supporters and advocates, professional experts, government and UN officials and NGO representatives to share their knowledge, views and experiences from other countries around the world. Down Syndrome International is extremely grateful to our sponsors, the Permanent Mission of Australia, Brazil, Japan, Mexico and Poland, and the United Nations in New York, and to UNICEF and the International Disability Alliance. I trust you will enjoy the conference and thank you for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. The next speaker is Her Excellency Mrs. Joanna Chroneka, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Poland to the United Nations.
Since 2006, March 21st each year marks the World Down Syndrome Day, established to honor and appreciate all persons with Down syndrome and their families. For us, it is a particular moment to show our support and solidarity. It also provides the unique opportunity to promote the rights of persons with intellectual disabilities. But most importantly, it gives voice to persons with Down syndrome to tell us their stories. Poland has been a proud co-organizer of the UN observance of the World Down Syndrome Day since it was proclaimed by the General Assembly. The theme of this year's celebrations couldn't be more relevant. Digital technology has been a lifeline during the COVID-19 health crisis. It has never before played such a vital role in connecting people. Whether it's about reaching out to our friends and loved ones through social media or using the technology to work or study, we are all relying on digital solutions more than ever before. Modern technology can be a key enabling factor in improving the opportunities for persons with disabilities to lead an independent life when it comes to their health, education and employment. However, it needs to be fully accessible and take into consideration the various needs of persons with disabilities. I am pleased that despite the different format of this year's commemorations, we will be able to hear from the self-advocates who will speak about how important it is to stay connected in the times of COVID-19 pandemic. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate Poland's commitment to promoting and protecting the human rights of persons with disabilities. We will continue our efforts in removing barriers and creating more inclusive and accessible societies for all, including within the digital sphere.
Thank you, Ambassador. I would now like to introduce His Excellency H.E. Mr. Kimura Tesuya, Ambassador Economic, Social and United Nations Management Affairs Permanent Representative of Japan to the UN.
I would like to thank Down Syndrome International for organizing this virtual World Down Syndrome Day conference under these challenging circumstances. It is an honor to address the opening of the conference. COVID-19 is a human security crisis that threatens our health, livelihood, and dignity. Even worse, it disproportionately impacts persons with disabilities, depriving them of work, education, and other crucial opportunities to connect in their communities. To overcome this crisis, COVID-19 response and recovery efforts must focus on protecting and empowering each and every individual with a vision to leave no one behind. To this end, the government of Japan, together with local government, has taken every measure to mitigate the pandemic's impact on persons with disabilities. The governments have made targeted efforts to secure the continuation of rehabilitation and other independent living services so that the persons with disabilities, including those with Down syndrome, can maintain independence and meaningful participation in society, remaining connected to others. Further, as the host of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games, the government of Japan supported an online program that connects Paralympic athletes in Asian countries with expert coaches and physical therapists in Japan. The pandemic has reshaped the way we live, and there are many challenges to achieving an inclusive society while adapting to these changes. The 3-day conference provides us with ample opportunity to identify difficulties that persons with Down syndrome face, and also discuss possible ways to overcome these challenges. I'm very grateful to be connected with you all here, and I'm looking forward to active discussions. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. The next speaker is Vladimir Chuk, Executive Director of the International Disability Alliance. Vladimir is going to talk about the effect of COVID-19 on people with intellectual disabilities and what needs to happen now.
Thank you very much. My name is Vladimir Chuk, and I am Executive Director of the International Disability Alliance. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at the World Down Syndrome Day. I will start speaking about COVID-19 and how COVID-19 impacted persons with disabilities. And then I will look a little bit ahead and what is needed right now to have a good, serious, and inclusive response to include persons with disabilities in the building back better, what is called, or what we should be maybe calling build forward better the world after pandemic. We are starting to learn about COVID-19 more and more. We are starting to have more data and more information. So, for example, we know that the majority of COVID-19 deaths have been persons with disabilities. We learned that persons with disabilities with intellectual disabilities have been up to 6 times more likely to die than the other persons. So generally, persons with disabilities were more likely to be at a greater risk of contracting COVID-19. And this comes from discrimination, pre-existing discrimination, and then lack of accessibility in the provision of information, lack of services, lack of support system, also need of persons with disabilities to access personal assistance, personal care, etc., that all of that were increasing their risk factor in the time of pandemic. We can also recollect that there was a very negative triage guidelines that effectively excluded persons with disabilities, especially at the beginning of pandemic. Persons with disabilities were denied critical care just because they were persons with disabilities. We also learned that persons with disabilities felt excluded and devalued by public messaging about COVID-19. At the beginning, if you would remember, the message was only elderly and disabled will die, and it's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal. And we learned that hard way. We lost many of our brothers and sisters. Then persons with disabilities also reported that they were facing food insecurity, that they were experiencing increased violence and abuse, poor psychosocial well-being, lacking access to essential medicines and rehabilitation, and not accessing personal support and assistance such as interpretation or guides because support persons being quarantined or worried about infection. All this happened. There were many surveys from which we were learning about how persons with disabilities were affected during the pandemic and still are. One of the most impactful survey was called Disability Rights Monitor on COVID-19. It was undertaken by 6 organizations, including IDA. And the survey produced a worrying conclusion that the states have overwhelmingly failed to take sufficient measures to protect the rights of persons with disabilities in their responses to pandemic. Another international study implemented by ADD on the impact of COVID-19 shows that on average, respondents reported losing 65% of their income since COVID-19 crisis began. Study done by European Disability Forum shows that in Kenya, 68% of persons with disabilities surveyed were not able to work. Finally, IDA launched the IDA survey on experience of persons with disabilities adapting to COVID-19 global pandemic. And this data will be critical in defining our advocacy on building back or building forward our economy and our labor markets in truly inclusive way, and also generally building our society in a more inclusive way. So we are now at the moment in which we need to look ahead. There are a lot of discrimination and a lot of devastating results as pandemic is still existing in our society. Simply, organizations of persons with disabilities were not included in the planning of the response, in the response itself. They were not consulted, and that's why the response failed. Now it's time to look ahead, as I said, and we need to include persons with disabilities at this moment to consult with them and to include them to hear how to better serve this population and how to build a society that is more inclusive. Right now, what we need the most is we need 3 points, and we are calling UN agencies and national governments to implement 3 steps at this stage. That is, those steps are very important. First one is privatization. We are calling for global and national vaccination plans to include prioritization of persons with disabilities, particularly persons with intellectual disabilities and Down syndrome, and persons with high support need. As well, persons living in institutional settings, older persons, and persons with health conditions that put them most at risk. So simply prioritization of persons with disabilities in the distribution of vaccines. Point 2, accessibility and active involvement. Information campaigns and vaccination delivery sites must be inclusive and accessible to all persons with disabilities. Organizations of persons with disabilities must be actively involved in the development of COVID-19 related planning and policy making, and specifically vaccination must only happen with the free and informed consent of persons with disabilities. Third point, inclusive data collection and dissemination. Data collected on vaccination programs must be disaggregated by age, sex, and disability and shared in accessible formats. We have to recollect that we were not, as the world, we failed in including persons with disabilities during pandemic. Let's not fail now. Let's include persons with disabilities in this vaccination process and especially prioritize them, because this is a way how we can end pandemic faster and how we can save lives of so many people with disabilities globally. This is a big request, this is a tall order, and we need to be united in requesting and demanding this from WHO, from local governments around the world. I will leave you with this message, and also I will say one more thing, that if anything positive this pandemic taught us is that this world is so interconnected. We are so much interconnected, and we are not safe and included unless we are all safe and included. And to do that well, we need to start with those people that are hardest to reach, that are most marginalized and most underrepresented, and those are persons with disabilities. So let's do a better job at the end of pandemic, and let's build a better community together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vladimir. The next speaker is Andrew Boyce from the UK Executive Director of Down Syndrome International. Andrew is going to talk about the importance of connecting and issues facing people with Down syndrome.
Hello, everybody. Vladimir has outlined very clearly how people with disabilities, and particularly people with intellectual disabilities and Down syndrome, have been negatively impacted by the COVID-19 global pandemic. I will now just take a short few minutes to look at this a bit more, specifically in relation to the theme Connect, which we're focusing on today. I will focus on what our members have been telling us since the onset of the pandemic. Like everyone else, people with Down syndrome across the world have been able to connect less in everyday life in the last 12 months. Connections in all aspects of their lives have been affected, including connections with family, with friends, in education, in terms of employment and leisure, and in other activities. However, for many people with Down syndrome, the ability to connect has been negatively impacted, disproportionately more than for others. Many have had to quarantine due to underlying health conditions commonly associated with Down syndrome, or on the basis of their disability. And the quality of access to education, access to work, and to other vital daily activities has often been severely reduced on the basis of their disability. To add to this negative impact, many have not been able to access information on an equal basis with others. Often information that has been made available has not been provided in formats that people with Down syndrome can understand. Or if the information is online, they may not have understood how to access this, or they may not have access to the technology on which so many of us rely to connect in our day-to-day lives. Only about half of the world's population can access and use the internet. The other half cannot. Many of the unconnected live in least developed countries or in impoverished rural and remote areas. Furthermore, a digital divide persists between more and less connected communities and groups of people. People with intellectual disabilities and Down syndrome often fall within groups who have the least digital access of all. Our members with Down syndrome told us about the negative impact of COVID-19 through a survey we carried out last year. This survey was only able to take into account those who have access to the necessary technology, of course. People reported less access to connecting in general. For example, seeing friends, going to school or working. But crucially, they also reported less support available to them to enable them to do their vital daily activities. The majority of the people with Down syndrome surveyed say that they are more worried and anxious. Mental health for everyone is at risk during these times, but people with Down syndrome are disproportionately impacted, and the signs and symptoms of their anxiety may not present in ways that are recognized. Dennis McGuire is going to talk about these issues after this presentation. As Vladimir said, the world has failed people with disabilities in the pandemic response. And a key reason for this is that they were not consulted in the response process. Now we need to make sure that their voices are heard, their views are taken into consideration, and that their human rights are upheld to build a better, more inclusive world from this point on. From our survey, we know that people with Down syndrome would like Down Syndrome International to help with this. 87% of people with Down syndrome surveyed said that they would find DSi organising meetings and advocating together online useful. In addition, 88% said that they would find information about COVID-19 that they could understand useful, and 100% said that they would find knowing what other people with Down syndrome have been doing during the pandemic useful. DSi will continue to work with our members and with international partners to give people with Down syndrome opportunities to connect and participate on a full and equal basis with others in all aspects of their lives. Being able to connect with others is a basic right. It's essential for personal well-being. We also know that people with Down syndrome can bring so much to the community wherever they live around the world, if just given the opportunity. We will seek to understand and learn from people with Down syndrome who tell us about the challenges they face to connect, many of which have been made so much greater since the advent of COVID-19. And we will help to develop and build on solutions that are being found. In these current times, we will work harder with our members to develop digital strategies. Digital accessibility right now clearly being fundamental to delivering equal access to all those vital things that we need in our lives. We will work to reduce the greater risk that people with intellectual disabilities and Down syndrome have of being left behind in this area. The most crucial thing we all must remember is to listen to, include, and empower people with Down syndrome so that we hear from them, we understand what works for them, and we can then develop responses and strategies around this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Next, we welcome Dennis McGuire. Dennis is a consultant at the Global Down Syndrome Foundation and international expert in mental wellness in the Down syndrome population. Dennis is going to talk about mental well-being during COVID-19.
Hi, my name is Dennis McGuire, and I was asked by Down Syndrome International to talk about connecting to you. And I worked with my colleagues, Dr. Coyne and Dr. Barry Martin. For many years, we saw thousands of people in both Chicago and Denver, and we learned a great deal from people with Down syndrome and their families. What we learned is that people have certain behavioral characteristics that are incredibly consistent, and they're an alternative to mental health labeling. They explain things and give you a way to solve problems and not just to label people. A label like depression may not really be as helpful as one of these behavioral characteristics. So what I want to talk about in the 10 minutes or 9 minutes we have, just a few of the issues which are related to connecting to other people. And in our culture, expressive language, social emotional skills are probably the most important in terms of how we connect and communicate to others. And people with Down syndrome have some significant issues around receptive and expressive language. Receptive language is both a strength and a weakness. They seem to take in everything, and I mean everything. They have kind of an ability to kind of visually almost record or track everything, and then, but they don't always know how to interpret it. And some of the complaints by families that, or some of the concerns, was that their sons and daughters were often in their bedrooms acting out scenes from their life outside in the world, and that was just a way for them to make sense out of the world. And the other issue is expressive language, and this is definitely an issue for folks with Down syndrome. And in particular, there's a problem with verbal language. It's just not a strength for so many of our guys, even our folks who are fairly articulate and or have good intelligibility with language. They are not good on their feet with the spoken word. There's just much better mediums for them. And so one of the ways that in the time we have to describe this is that people with Down syndrome will often have what we call taking the fifth. When asked, how was your day, they'll often try to avoid the question. And taking the fifth is the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution that allows people to protect themselves by not incriminating themselves. So our folks really try to avoid questions because they don't feel safe. They don't want to displease or create a problem or make a mistake. So they'll often try to avoid the question. So they're simply not safe when it comes to verbal communication. So we do encourage people to try other mediums. One of the things we've discovered over and over is that people with Down syndrome have like a photographic visual memory. They're highly responsive to visual images. And so instead of asking your son or daughter to describe something or talk to you about what happened to them if they went out to a restaurant or a dance, the best thing may be to say, do you have a picture? And so many of our folks have cameras and can take pictures. And so in this case, we've learned that a picture truly can be worth 1,000 words. And so they may add a few words to this, but a picture of them dancing or food at a restaurant or some kind of activity at the fifth Special Olympics, if they had somebody had taken a picture or they take their own picture, they can simply add a word: play, work, care, dance. And so it can be a very effective way for our folks to communicate and let you know and let you into their world. The other thing we found that's kind of interesting is that it's important to remember that the written word is visual. And what that means is it's a strength still for our folks with Down syndrome. So we suggest to families, if it makes sense, to have people with Down syndrome write in notepads or journals. And this can be a very effective way for them to feel confident when they're communicating to others, because they have some kind of written, it kind of gives them some ground or solid way to kind of express themselves. And an example, there was a young man whose mother brought him in to see me at some point, and she was kind of concerned because he stopped talking to her. And she was a very confident, strong person, but so was he. And so I was kind of curious why this happened, but I asked him then to talk to his mother. And when he talked, what happened was kind of interesting. He had this tiny little voice. Clearly, he was intimidated by her verbally. So we simply had him use a journal to write down ideas through the course of his day. At the end of the night, go and talk to his mother by referring back to the notes he took, and this changed things dramatically for him. And it's kind of interesting that in the course of this conversation, she laughed and said, you know, he actually used to leave Post-it notes all over the house because that was similar to note. Journal is a way to communicate ideas to his mom. I'll be home at 5, or can you do this? And so they re-implemented that as well. Art is also a phenomenal medium for people to express themselves. Spend an hour after hour quality time. They may simply need some materials, of crayons, even colored pencils and paper, and they can spend just days. And there's so much that they can communicate through this. These are just a few examples. This was from Australia. It was given to me as a gift. And this was from Mexico. This was a local Chicago-based artist. And so despite expressive language, then there are some very effective ways for people to communicate. Moving into social emotional skills, and despite whatever limitations people have in expressing themselves, they have a kind of a sensitivity, an emotional sensitivity to others. They're very, very intuitive and perceptive, and they often have this uncanny sensitivity to others. And it's many parents have told us that their son and daughter will often know their feelings before they do. They just have that kind of intuitive ability to read people's feelings and emotions. And this is incredibly helpful in building goodwill in their families, with other kids, or in a dating situation with their buddies. These are all places where that sensitivity can be incredibly helpful. And goodwill can be very beneficial, for example, in situations where they may make mistakes in a job, for example. Some of our guys take things a little too literally, because they're kind of concrete, and the boss says, come and see me anytime. And they do, and of course, or call me anytime, which is a little more problematic. So it's not uncommon for our guys to call the boss at 3 in the morning. And so that goodwill can go a long way to helping people kind of be more receptive to learning new things. And so a boss not letting people go just because of that, but actually helping them. But the sensitivity to others can create problems because our guys are super, super sensitive to others' negative emotions. They have very open, sweet hearts, and they can be especially hurt by anger or tension or conflict. And what's important to know is they don't have to actually be the target of that anger or those emotions, that they simply don't have a defensive structure to kind of protect themselves. And even in an environment where two other people are upset or angry or conflicted with each other, this can be very hurtful and overwhelming to our folks. So we strongly recommend to our families that they keep track of that. And I don't know how many times we ended up getting a referral from someone who refused to go to work or school. And when we looked more closely, we found out that there were some people in that environment who were, the conflict or tension in them was pretty strong. And so we just had to help the families and the staff to kind of moderate things so our guys felt more comfortable going back. And finally, just a little bit about self-talk. When we first started, there were so many people that were put on medications because of self-talk. And what's important to understand is that it's very normal. It's part of normal development. And there's two reasons. For teens and adults, self-talk is still not accepted in public. And also, it can be very alarming to families, even in a private space. But it's important to understand it's revered in the child development field because it's a part of all kids' developmental processes. They use self-talk to guide themselves to do a new task. So they often need that boost that the self-talk gives them, particularly when learning something new. Usually this is internalized by about the age of 7 in most kids, but much later in children with other challenges, learning or attention deficit or hearing or visual problems. And it's much later than in teens or adults with Down syndrome. And it turns out it's pretty common for all of us, just we're a little more careful to keep it under our breath. So I guess that's the time I have. So let me just ask if you need more information about what I presented today. My colleague, Dr. Chicoine, and I both have authored a book, Mental Wellness, and we just actually are going to have a second edition coming out in about 2 weeks, and hopefully that'll help to answer. That's your book. That's what we learned from you, and I think it can be helpful to people. So thank you. It was an honor being here, and appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. We now welcome speakers from the Down Syndrome Society of Bangladesh. They are going to talk about living with Down syndrome during COVID-19.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Vladimir Hassan. I am a self-advocate of Down Syndrome Society of Bangladesh. I am the national representative of DSi in Bangladesh. এই করোনা ভাইরাসের থেকে চলছি, বসাইছি, খেলাধুলা করছি, যেমন ফুটবল খেলা, ব্যাডমিন্টন খেলা। এই করোনার মধ্যে সবার সাথে কথা বলছি, ফেসবুক, মেসেঞ্জার। থ্যাংক ইউ।
আমার নাম সুলতানা মুশফিকা ফুল। আই এম সেফ অ্যাডভোকেট। আমি বাসায় শিখেছি, হাত ধুয়েছি, নাচ করেছি, নতুন জামা পরেছি, টিভিও দেখেছি, ফোনে যোগাযোগ করেছি, ফেসবুকে যোগাযোগ করেছি, আর জুমে ক্লাস করেছি, ব্যায়াম করেছি, নাচ করেছি। ধন্যবাদ।
আমার নাম জেল কুকে কাজ করি, কারণে মাছ ধরি, শরীরে হাত ধরে টেকনোলজি মুসিবু লোকে মমরফুন করে ফোন পেছুর চৌকথুন বেশি ফুল সারা সুন্দর মমর সুন্দর গাড়ি ছুটে নাচ গান ফেলে পারো ব্যায়াম করে ফেলে পানি কাশনে পানি গোসল করে।
The whole world is now facing the crisis of COVID-19. Bangladesh is not an exception. The coronavirus has spread to almost all over the country. In the lockdown situation, children and adults with Down syndrome are at highest risk due to their health condition. DSSB at national level with many organizations have been working intensively to connect, to ensure protection and livelihood for these people. Communication and consultation with this family show the low-income families of people with Down syndrome had been passing very bad condition. Our little support, collaboration and goodwill is making their daily life happy and comfortable. So we have been trying to connect family with Down syndrome, including our self-advocate, to remain connected. Happy World Down Syndrome Day.
Hello everyone. Down Syndrome Society of Bangladesh, a national platform for people with Down syndrome, is working across the country to ensure rights, social inclusion and employment. DSSB has tied up with many renowned national and international organizations. It is now recognized as country representative member of Down Syndrome International. People with Down syndrome have ability and potentials which are not also recognized in most situations. During the COVID-19, with proper care, assistance from DSSB has been keeping connect for their better health and mental support. To ensure protection and livelihood for these people, it is high time to come forward to assist these vulnerable people in the current catastrophe. Let us all come forward and extend our kind support to connect so that self-advocates can actively contribute with their talents and skills. A very happy World Down Syndrome Day.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Next, we welcome a self-advocate from Down Syndrome Foundation, Nigeria, to talk about connection during COVID-19.
Joanna.
My name is
My name is Awele Mayamoji.
My name is Peter Bobute.
My name is Oluwatife.
My name is Gabriel Pastor. My name is Aina Ainuna.
My name is Soma Omire.
My name is Sunama Aya. My name is Maiwa.
Self-advocate for Down Syndrome Foundation, Nigeria.
Thank you. Hi, Solomon.
Hi, Joseph.
What is the importance of connection to you?
Important
Of connection?
of connection
Is what?
friends,
Connecting with your friends?
and family.
Wow. Thank you, Solomon.
Thank you, Joseph.
Hi, Mayowa. How do you feel not able to connect?
I feel sad.
You feel sad?
Yes.
Hi, Aina. So, how did you feel not able to connect during COVID-19 with your friends and loved ones?
I feel bored.
You feel bored. Hi, Awele.
Hi.
Hi, Uloma.
Hi.
What are the new ways you three have found to connect during COVID-19?
YouTube.
YouTube.
YouTube.
Yeah, so you connected with your friends via YouTube?
Yes.
Wow, nice. Hi, Solomon.
Hi, today.
So, what are the new ways you found to connect with your friends during COVID-19?
And Zap.
You use WhatsApp?
Yeah.
Wow. Hi, Wumi.
How to say?
So, what are the new ways you found to connect with your friends during COVID-19?
I'm using iPad.
You use iPad? Wow. So, Ibolu.
Hi.
So, what are the new ways you use to connect with your friends during COVID-19?
Call.
Phone.
Call.
You made phone call?
Yeah.
Wow. Through your friends with your phone?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Bolu Atife. So, what is the new way you use in connecting with your friends?
I use my Instagram.
You use Instagram
Yeah.
to connect with your friends?
Yeah.
Wow.
I do blouse.
Wow, you browse.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you, Favor.
Thank you for.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Next, we welcome self-advocate from the Down Syndrome Association of Turkey. They will talk about staying connected.
Ahlakı olmasaydı birbirimizi tanıyamazdık. zorluklar oldu. Dışarı çıkamaz oldum. İş arkadaşlarımı görmeye bile maskeyle gittim. Ben sinemayı çok severim. Pandemi yüzünden sinemaya gidemedim. Dışarı çıkamadım. Kardeşlerimin bile evine gidemedim. Üzüldüm, ağladım. Hatta canım çok sıkıldı.
Önceden dışarı çıkabiliyordum. Arkadaşımla geziyordum, görüşüyordum, eğleniyordum. Şimdi de dışarı çıkamıyorum. Üzülürdüm, canım çok sıkılırdı.
Evde oturmaktan sıkıldım ve beğendim. İşimi özledim.
Ya görüntüyle ya da Zoom'la konuşuyoruz. Online eğitimlerde biz arkadaşımın doğum günü partisini kutladık. Arkadaşımın adı Dilara.
Bu korona yüzünden ben de maalesef bir şey yapamıyorum. Online eğitim bana iyi geliyor. Hem pazartesi, salı, perşembe, cuma diye anladım, katılıyor. Hiç boş durmuyor. Bazı görüntüleri alıyor, mesaj çekiyor, telefonla konuşuyor.
Dünyadaki bütün Down sendromlu arkadaşlarıma buradan sesleniyorum. Evinizden çıkmayınız. Pandemi süreci dolayısıyla evde kalmanız gerekiyor. Arkadaşlar dışarı çıktığınızda maske takmanızı unutmayın lütfen. Hastaneye gittiğinizde kendinize 4 adım uzakta durmanızı istiyorum.
Güzel davransınlar, iyi davransınlar. Ben mutlu olmak istiyorum, huzur olmak istiyorum, mutluluk istiyorum, gülmek istiyorum, iyi olmak istiyorum.
Dışarı çıktığımızda bizi saygı göstermelerini istiyoruz. İş ve herhangi bir yere gittiğinizde size saygıyla davranmalarını istiyorum. Lütfen kendinize çok dikkat edin. Sizleri çok seviyorum ben.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you to all our speakers today for sharing your views and experiences. It is clear that connections are so important for people all over the world. We hope this session has made it clear that people with Down syndrome and intellectual disabilities must not be left behind. This is particularly important in the current COVID-19 response and recovery period. Thank you to all of you watching today on GoToWebinar and UN Web TV for your time and support. Goodbye and have a nice day.